Okay, so hi, this is Patrick. I'm filling in for Dr. Randall right now. He's not around. He's doing a radio show, so he will be probably joining us halfway through the show. I have a really special guest today. This is, and whoever knows my story out there definitely knows who this is. This is Tom from montalk.net. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. This is going to be cool. We're going to talk about aliens a little bit. We're going to talk about our personal experiences, especially one that I recently had. I had some more additional details to share about that. So at any rate, let's go ahead and dive in. We know from our own personal experiences and the things that we've been led to synchronistically and the things that we researched that there is a very big series of events that are unfolding in the world. And they're all tied to a real intense amount of alien intervention, which has been going on for thousands of years, literally. One of the things that that I really was shocked to discover that when I was a boy and I was 11 years old and I had a UFO above my head, that as an adult, after going through my awakening, that was a real thing that happened, that was an actual reality, and that I had to face the understanding that I had potentially been abducted. And of course, as going through this process and going through this awakening, I was synchronistically led to your material. And when I came across that, and you are a lifelong abductee, as you say, and you have plenty of experience in this arena. So one of the things that I had come to realize was that in my own experience, and probably as in yours as well, is that they had modified us in some way, perhaps genetically. They did something to us to where we would be heavily involved in what is rolling out right now. And there is, like I had mentioned in the beginning of this, when I started talking, was that there is an alien, I guess the word would be alien intervention. Would that be the right way to say it? There's an alien agenda. That's the word I'm looking for. An alien agenda that is unfolding. So Tom, can you tell me just a little bit on the surface, based on everything that you've written and researched, that agenda as you know it unfolding? We don't have to dive so much into the details of the different negative alien factions. One of the ones that I know of specifically, at least in my own research and experiences, is the Archons. And the mention of the Archons dates back to the Gnostic writings and such. And you have done a tremendous amount of work on, especially with your articles regarding Gnosticism and such. So, Tom, what do you think's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, right?
In 5 seconds.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a huge question, but ultimately you have to kind of start a long time ago and how things used to be here on Earth. And if you actually look at a lot of the ancient astronaut theory stuff, I mean, most people are familiar with ancient aliens, so you've probably seen how a lot of these ancient structures cannot be explained by regular human labor, right? They have to be built by some sort of advanced technology. So some people were theorizing it was ancient Atlanteans who had developed a very high level of technology before a cataclysm happened, and then the survivors used that technology to try to rebuild. And so that's where we get a lot of these ancient structures from. But another thing you find back then is that you actually have the phenomenon of these so-called gods walking amongst humans, living in temples, being worshipped, kind of like the Stargate movie. And so there used to be a time period where these otherworldly beings were actually a lot more open than they are nowadays. They used to walk amongst people, fly around in the skies, have temples dedicated to them where they would come down and pick up the food offerings that were given, and they'd haul it off and use it for their own nourishment. But a time period, a thing happened somewhere around 1000 BC, somewhere between there and like maybe 1200 BC, where it seems like they kind of went dark. In other words, they went quiet. They weren't allowed to be out in the open anymore. And even amongst Christian theologists, they talk about a time when God stopped talking to man. It used to be that you had Moses and all these different patriarchs talking directly with Yahweh or Jehovah or the Lord of Israel. That was their name for it. And of course, don't forget, other people back then had their own gods that they were talking with too. The Dogons had the star gods that came down from Sirius. So, ancient times, there was a lot of alien visitation happening. But right around 1000 BC, a lot of it stopped. And ever since then, most of it merely became mythology. I mean, you would still have people interacting with, the fairy folk or things like that. But it's more like what we have nowadays, where we have isolated instances of alien abduction or contact. Okay. So generally what happened was, it seems like the alien presence back then was quarantined, or Earth was quarantined away from the alien presence, and only isolated sporadic contact was allowed, like private contact, so that humanity as a whole in general was kind of left untouched, at least within the public sphere. Okay. So that went on for a long time, and occasionally you would have, mass contact attempts, but it wouldn't go anywhere. I mean, for example, during the Dark Ages in France, King Charlemagne at the time had to actually he actually had to create a decree saying that these jinn, all these otherworldly beings, cannot come down here and mess with our people, because that's what they were doing. They're coming down in their sky ships and abducting people, taking them back to their other world, their other realm, and trying to show these people, like, hey, we're not bad guys. This is what it's like. It's really awesome. Now you go back to your villages and you tell other people about who we are and how wonderful it is. So these people, they get brought back, and what happens? Those people will get treated as witches, and they got burned and killed and persecuted for consorting with these otherworldly devils or something. So I think these beings learned at that time that humanity was not ready yet for that kind of contact. And so for the past 1,000 years, there really hasn't been too much up until about the early 1900s. And that's when you started having contact, let's say in Germany, between certain alien groups and the predecessors to the Nazis. The Tula Society and the Vril Society, and the channelers that were involved in that, they were actually channeling actual otherworldly beings, tapping into schematics and technology for spacecrafts and time travel technology. So that was happening in Germany, and also in the U.S. at the time. Those were, well, actually even back in the late 1800s, there were these aerial ships sightings that were being seen, back in the 1880s, and people were wondering what they were. Well, these phenomenon have been happening in a accelerating crescendo all the way through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and you got to wonder what is that all for? And so, in my opinion, I think they are probing us, surveying our reactions and our state of mind and what knowledge base we have, and how we will perceive and react to the day when they actually show up once again openly in the skies after about 3,000 years of Earth being in a kind of a pseudo quarantine where they were not allowed to do that. Okay, so I think we're ramping up to this thing called disclosure, which is when aliens are revealed to the entire world as being real. But in order for them to pull that off, though, they have to make sure that we are that we are properly conditioned to react to them in a certain way that is conducive to them. Okay, so for example, I don't know if you remember back in the 90s, but alien abduction stuff was quite popular in the 90s. There was a lot of books out, by Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, John Mack, all these abduction researchers. They were coming out with abduction books back then. Even Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton met with Lawrence Rockefeller, one of the Rockefeller families. And he's a big time UFO buff. And he pushed so hard for alien disclosure to happen. So he was meeting with Bill and Hillary back then, and they themselves were very much into the whole UFO thing. And in fact, in 2016, when during the election, the run-up to the election, Hillary was actually named as the ET candidate because she had promised that when she became president, she would blow the lid on it and reveal everything about it and basically precipitate this alien disclosure event. Okay, but that didn't happen, and it's actually a good thing that didn't happen. Because in my research, the aliens who are most eager and that are most interested in showing up to the world are actually not the good ones.
Yeah.
And the reason that is because the actual positive aliens, it's kind of like if you watch Star Trek, there's this thing about non-intervention. The whole idea that you don't interfere with a less advanced civilization, because as we know from the Europeans going to Central America, during the late 1400s and early 1500s, those Central Americans didn't survive that encounter. They were enslaved. They were wiped out through disease. They were, basically manipulated and conquered by a technologically superior civilization. And that just happens naturally. I mean, same thing with the Native Americans in North America. So if we have an alien civilization that wants to reveal itself now, like today, I'm not sure that mankind is necessarily advanced enough for it. I mean, there's plenty of people out there, even people watching this, who would have no problem with it, but they're not in the majority, right? They're in a very small minority. The majority are the ones who don't believe in alien stuff, that have never researched it, that it's not even part of the reality. It's not what they're planning for with their life goals, their IRAs, and their business investments. They're running a company based on certain technologies that would become obsolete if aliens were to show up. The stock markets would crash, everything would shuffle around, everything would be inverted. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why, up to this point, governments have been very reluctant to reveal anything about the existence of UFOs. They've been very hush about it. That's because they're very worried about society in general panicking and kind of coming apart at the seams. Okay, but what happens if COVID lockdowns or global economic collapse or some sort of a limited nuclear warfare scenario? What if that already ruins society to a level where it's already in tatters? At that point, what difference would it make for aliens to come in and reveal themselves? Because everything is already collapsed. Okay, there's nothing further that they can destroy.
They'd be saviors.
Yeah, exactly. But
they
can
would
come
want
in.
to be saviors or come.
Yeah, and they can come in and they can be saviors. So, for example, if let's say China and the USA got into a conflict in the South China Sea, military conflict, which is a very heavily disputed region right now, and let's say that that escalated into something that eventually turned into a very small scale nuclear war before something got stopped. If that were to happen, that actually would cross a major line in terms of ecological disasters, just everything. And then aliens at that point, and I'm talking about the more negative ones, they could easily come in at that point. They could wag their finger and they can say, we've given you a chance to evolve on your own. And this is what happened. Look at what your human leadership has done. You guys couldn't work out your differences. And now you created a nuclear accident and it's going to impact things for generations. So we're going to either take over or we're going to work with your leadership to guide you towards a new age under our direction. And then at that point, they might offer technology, they might offer knowledge, medicines, genetic upgrades, all the stuff that seems awesome until you look at the fine print. And what is the fine print? The fine print is that if you were to let that go on long enough, our human genetics, everything that would make us truly human in the good sense, like our independence, our emotions, our ability to think for ourselves, that would get watered down or wiped out through genetic interbreeding or genetic modifications. And the reason I say this is because if you research a lot of the alien abduction material going back into the 90s, so much of it was centered around breeding programs to breed hybrids between gray aliens, aliens in general, and humans. And when asked, why are they doing this? Well, they give a baloney excuse, which is that, we cloned ourselves so much over so many generations that we lost our capacity for emotion. We kind of became diluted. We became these robotic creatures. And so we want to breed ourselves with humans to create a new hybrid race that has the best of our abilities, which is, psychic abilities, super high intelligence, and the best of human qualities, which would be like, physical robustness to live in this environment and so on. And so that's the excuse that they give. But the thing is, these abductions, they also have other beings involved in it, beings that even look like us. They look very much human. So why aren't these robotic gray beings breeding with those guys and creating their hybrids? Why do they need us? And why do they seem intent on taking these hybrids and placing them in our society amongst us? Or let's say to become our eventual leadership class. Like, for example, if aliens were to reveal themselves openly and say that, hey, we're coming in here to guide you into a new age, how would humans actually interface with these otherworldly aliens who might actually be residing in a different dimension? Well, the way you would do that is you would have to have something in between that can act as a liaison between the humans and this other dimensional alien class. So something that's very much human but has psychic abilities and is sort of semi-alien, and that's where hybrids come into the picture. So when you asked about what the big alien agenda probably is, I would say that it's the end of this alien quarantine that has been going on for about 3,000 years, where they want to now reveal themselves openly and implement a more modern version of what they had going on before 3,000 years ago, which is, once again, I don't want to say worshipped, but at least being in positions of leadership and controlling our planet openly. I mean, they've been manipulating history covertly, but they want to be it openly, and they want to have us completely subservient and under their thumb, and eventually, probably incorporated into their entire system, so that we end up maybe even being taken to other planets to abduct those people to be workers with this alien empire. So it seems kind of ludicrous, but if you look at all the data, that's what it's suggesting.
The thing is, I mean, to me especially, it's not ludicrous because, remember, I was coming from a place where I didn't know any of this. I was just a software engineer, just minding my own business. My life went completely just like everything became a mess. Next thing I know, I'm laying on an operating table with tubes coming out of me, and facing down near-death experiences, and then go through a huge, massive supernatural awakening, which starts to lead me to this material, primarily your material, which I always thought was really fascinating, considering whenever I would do searches for what was going on, the only search results I would get would be your articles. And then when I would read your articles, your writing was so similar to my own that it was almost like I was reading my own stuff. So it carried, the vibrations just matched, and I absorbed everything. I had my eyes open wide. I guess that's why they call it an awakening. So and for the most part, having that experience at 11 years old, I was more inclined to fringe topics. So, but not necessarily alien topics. Now, I didn't believe or not believe. I just went more to a more, I guess, kind of an esoteric route with regards to subjects such as out-of-body experiences. I was really into Robert Monroe. I was into Project Stargate. I was into those various things. But then when I started to get the visions about what reality really was, and that was, mind-blowing on its own, because they were clear as day, overlaid over my own vision, and getting those with intuition. And I guess for the viewers who might not know, that one of them was a paintbrush in a hand painting the sky in front of me. And the intuition was that we paint our own future. That was the actual intuition. I didn't know anything about reality creation at the time. And then the other one was the two-sided coins with those bands of energy around them, and that consciousness and reality were one and the same. There were two sides to that coin, but that led me to discover things such as, that there's really no physical, that it's all just a decoded experience in a sense. Another vision was the shoebox on its side with cameras going in and out of the shoebox, like a line of them. And they were going and they were looking around the scene, and then they would go out the other end. And the intuition was that we have encoding and decoding mechanisms that are intimately related to the scene that we're experiencing. And then the fourth one was the projector image, and then it was the projector reel over an image. But for some reason or another, this one did not have intuition. But then my brother-in-law, at the same time these visions were happening, randomly sent me a book about Edgar Cayce. And I started to go through there, and I read something very similar that Edgar Cayce had said. And then I was also led to Joseph Murphy and something very similar about the projector reel. So I got the explaining for that vision from those two experiences. And this was around 2012 or 2013. So I had not yet been led to your material. I kind of weaved in and out because at the time I was breaking free from, I was heavily, and I was heavily addicted to Adderall, and my mind wasn't in the right spot. And coming out of those surgeries and almost dying, I felt empty in the world. I wasn't getting the proper feedback from the world, emotional feedback. I felt like I couldn't feel anymore, and classic symptoms of like PTSD. So, but then I had, my wife who I was with, the reason I always wear, and I love my awesome wife shirt, gave me love like I had never experienced. So it was unconditional love. And then we did things like soul gazing, which was mind blowing. And she started to share these experiences with me. And then I'd seen we saw the eye of Ra in the sky, and not necessarily associating that with a negative symbol at the time. Everything was started to become very incredible. Like the feelings were so emotionally rich and intense. And this, I can only assume, was because our vibrations were very high with the combination of the love and everything that was going on. And just back-to-back things like that. And then I got into your material to read about what was happening to me, that it was a spiritual awakening. And then suddenly I was introduced to the alien agenda. And that took on an entirely, that made my awakening take on an entirely new meaning. And when I read your, what I believe is called Discerning Alien
Disinformation.
Information. That book, when I was reading it, I had this intuition that these were subjects that I was going to have to very soon understand better, because that essentially this was going to happen. And I remember that feeling, and that intuition was so strong and unquestionable. And I literally knew when I was reading that I was reading a roadmap for something that I would be engaged in the future. And I had an understanding through investigating things, and you had just said this, that what's the word? Not revelations. What they were supposed to do in 2016, disclosure. That disclosure was supposed to happen in 2016, and that came and went, and I had wondered about that. But as I started to dive deeper into these subjects, including being led to David Icke in a very synchronistic and magical kind of way, and then absorbing all of his material based on archons and this and that. It's just been a really, I don't mean to go on and on about it. It's just been so mind-blowing. And then, you've been a kind of a party to this because I've been in constant contact with you as this has been unfolding, and it's still unfolding. I don't know if you saw my recent round of emails when I sent you an email at 4:42, and then I picked up your book. And then on page 442 is it was what we were going to be talking about in the meeting or in the Zoom meeting. So it's been like this every day, and it's recently my blog just started going viral again. The first time it went viral was when I wrote "Know Your World," that article about archons, and that thing blew up. Like I'm talking like there were 5,000 people came to my site. That article was translated in like 10 different languages that I've come across, seeing it in all sorts of places that I would have never expected. So something is actually something is happening, and it's just utterly fascinating. For the most part, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you was just to finally connect this way, because we've been going back and forth with email, and you participated in that show back with Dr. Randall. So what are your, okay, so when it comes to, I know that when it comes to the aliens right now, it is intimately tied to the New World Order. And we see there are actual precise steps that are being taken to implement their plans. And we do know for a fact that the negative alien factions, they do want us to put the shackles on ourselves. And the positive alien factions, they don't intervene. And I know this from my own personal experiences. They led me to my awakening in at some point there was some big intervention, but at other times, but it was always hands-off intervention. It was never like they abided their time with me, and for some reason or another I had to awaken. It was like either do or die, and you had explained it as it sounding like a plane crashing, but I had been given information that I had a life task that I was supposed to do at 35, and 35 had come, but I was still having problems with addiction. And then I had that experience where I typed in my address in Google, and it returned a message to me telling me essentially that the Adderall was getting in the way of me continuing down the path that I needed to be going. So I ended up, made it easy for me to get rid of that addiction after that, because I was like, holy crap. Like my first thought was, how the hell does somebody at Google know what's going on in my life? But then I started to realize that it was all part of this awakening. So I've had direct interactions. My Kindle would have messages to me in the morning telling me what I needed to do. And everything you had said in a lot of your writings about how positive aliens work with us is true per my experience. So we got Dr. Randall now. He's back. And
Hi, Randall. Hi, good to meet you.
Oh, sorry. I already did your introduction for you. I kept it real short. Okay, so we've been, Tom and I have been talking about personal experiences and how my awakening related to his material and such, and now you are here with us. So let me pick back up where the conversation left off. I believe that we are discussing positive aliens and how they have a hands-off approach to us, and we are kind of from my understanding and everything that I went through. People like Tom, myself, and others going through this awakening are kind of like the foot soldiers. We're the boots on the ground. And our role is almost similar to theirs. We have to take a less abrasive, hands-off approach. We present the information and give it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, where we can offer that up. We can't, we can't stand out there and force them to read the stuff that we want them to read. And I know from your experience, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is something I want to let you go with. You're kind of like like the center of a wagon wheel, it seems like to me. Whereas you went through your very early experiences, and this began when you were a little kid, and you became aware and awakened aware of this alien presence from a very young age, and we're able to jump right into this. You've been going at this for 15, 16 something years now, right? Probably even more. And so is that how you feel about your role here? Do you feel like you are kind of, because everything I experienced was attached to you, and I imagine other people's is just the same.
Yeah, and other people have affected me in an equal way. They were their own axis of the wheel too, and I was just a spoke. So it is a big network that keeps spreading out. And of course, you yourself, Patrick, and you too, Dr. Randall, you guys will be the center of your own wheels too. And, it keeps spreading out to every torch that you light, is going to light another torch. That's what it comes down to. And with me, for example, I had alien abduction experiences as a kid. And they weren't imagined because I was asking my mom and my grandma about who these beings were that I called the stone men or the gray men. And that's before I had read ever a single thing about the gray aliens, okay? So that was happening back then. But I didn't really dive into the actual research until I was, until the early 90s. So right around 93 is when I got my library card. And I started reading every UFO book in the local library, okay? So I've been doing that for, several decades now. And I've networked with thousands of people who shared with me their experiences. And so, it gives me a lot of dots to connect. And that's why, I and others like me have the perspective that we do. It's not pure speculation. It's, I would dare say it's a scientific deduction of the available data.
Oh, I know for a fact. It's really incredible, especially the abduction stuff or the interaction with these aliens. You know of my recent story with who I call Blockhead. And I have something going on with that had started to appear in my right arm, and it's kind of like a bruise and a slight pain that happened after that experience. And I'm still investigating why that is. I'm not nervous about it, but I do know that they have a tendency to implant things from everything that I've read. I've also been abducted. I've had my energy body abducted too. And when that had happened, I wasn't aware that was actually happening. I thought I was having an out of body experience, and then I blacked out. I came out of my body horizontally to the right, and it was forced. It wasn't per my own natural, meditation or anything that like something that you would learn from the Moreau Institute. It was literally just a complete ejection while still having and maintaining awareness, and then blacking out. And then I woke back up in my body. So and you've had many experiences like that. I'm sure you've had, and I can recall you've even taken some measures where you have set up situations where you can like audio recordings where you've heard clicks and things like that. And any type of these attempts, you've kind of foiled them, and you've written some good advice, which I didn't put into practice, obviously. And I had to isolate myself at that time. But can you go into detail into some of these, tell me about the most hardcore abduction experience that you could recall.
Okay, well, those were the ones that I had when I was a kid. Okay, and I was only about 3-4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lived in Germany at the time. We lived on the, I think, 5th or 6th floor of an apartment building in Germany, in the middle of a nice little town. It's called Neustadt. Anyway, so in this town, in this bedroom, I remember it was about 2 p.m, sun coming in through the windows, and the door was closed. My mom was there, and she said, Tom, stay there. There's some people out in the rest of the apartment that I need to go meet. I got stuff to do. So she would leave, and as soon as she closes the door, all of a sudden my memories would start flooding back of all the previous time this had happened. And I knew that at any second now, what would basically be a line of gray aliens would come in through the door. They would open the door, and they would come stumbling in and grab me and take me out through the rest of the apartment, to the balcony, and up into the air, into this floating craft, which I don't really remember what it looked like, but I do remember floating in the air above the courtyard below into the ship. And so I knew that this was about to happen, so I would run immediately to the corner of the room and hide, or back when we had a bed that you could lift up the bottom part, you stow blankets underneath, I would lift up the end of the bed and I would dive in there and kind of like close it again. And I do have a couple memories where I was in that bed for, must have been a good 5-10 minutes with these grays just kind of walking around the bed, waiting for me to come out. I don't know why they couldn't just lift it, but I was hiding from them pretty good. But eventually, I think the telepathic pressure that I could feel at the time, it would sort of like maybe become compliant, and then I would open the bed and then they would grab me, and then out I would go. So those were the most vivid ones that I had. And that happened a lot. Like every time it happened, it would feel like, oh shit, oh shoot, this already happened. I don't know, a month ago, something like that. So every year it'd probably be a dozen times, maybe even 2 dozen times when I was a little kid. So those were the ones that I remember the most vividly.
Do you recall the look of the ship? You said, I think you said you don't really exactly recall, but any vague memories of it?
Well, the inside, I remember some things where it's like it's metallic, and you've got portholes looking out into the outside, and those were round. So it's like rounded, metallic, curved. Those were the impressions that I got. I have another one where it was me, my family, and a friend of the family, a guy, and we were out in the woods, kind of going for a walk and picking blueberries and stuff. And that's when we had another alien encounter. And I think all of us got abducted during that one. But I remember when the ship was leaving, I remember what it looked like, and it's kind of like it's very reminiscent of if you ever go to like a carnival or like a county fair, and they got this one UFO ride where it's this big spinning disc, and you go inside of it and you kind of like brace yourself up against the wall, and it twirls around, and you kind of get okay. So from the outside, it looked a lot like that. It was this big spinning metallic thing with some lights on it, and it was kind of shaped like a lantern, okay, shaped like a lantern, and it was just kind of revolving, and then and it flew away. So
Because the one that I had seen when I was 11, this is the strange thing was because I looked up as an adult to see if there were other sightings. I was in Spring, Texas at the time, and there were in 1989. It was very large. It was right above the house, and there was an observation platform in the center that I could remember as being either blue or deep purple. Around it was very metallic, and it was a cylinder, but it was so huge that I couldn't. It was going over half of the house already, so I couldn't see part of it. But it was focused right above me. The thing that I remember, and this is the most curious part about it, was sound, and it wasn't just normal sound. It was like multi-dimensional sound. It was sound like I'd never heard before. And I went under the water because I was swimming in our pool to escape the noise more than to escape the ship. Now, I've heard people say that these ships make no sound. I've heard that. I've heard people say that they make sound. What I was hearing might not have been the sound of like an engine, or it didn't sound anything like an engine, didn't sound anything like a helicopter, and it didn't sound anything like like a jet would. But it was a very interesting sound, and it could have been part of the whole abduction thing. But there was a lapse of memory between I went under the water, held my breath as long as I could, came back up, and then it was gone. So there was from the time I went under the water, I'm not sure if they had already got me and then put me under the water, or I went under the water and then came back. But from that I just kind of thought, okay, I got out of the pool, I got my towel, I went upstairs, and I just laid down at my bed. And that was the only direct, and I know for a fact that I was allowed to see that thing for a reason, because obviously as things were going on later on, as I was becoming awakened and learning all of this stuff again, I would flash back to that. Oh crap, this is true, because I saw this. I saw these ships. I've seen these beings that are communicating with me right now as I'm going through this awakening. From the time of 11, getting wrapped up, becoming a teenager, getting wrapped up into life, and then having a career. And even though I was addicted to Adderall, I was very successful, and possibly because I was a workaholic because of the Adderall. So I forgot about all that until my experiences happened. So that's my own impression of the ships. And then of course have you ever had when they've abducted the energy body?
I've had it where I definitely was out of body, and I was sort of being whisked away through what felt like a vertical tractor beam, but I don't remember what happens after that. And it's difficult to remember what happens, especially in that kind of a state, because, I mean, it's because you're not even in your body, so the brain isn't really recording anything. It's difficult.
That's why I had blacked
out. But
out.
obviously, I mean, for abductions, not all abduction tasks need a physical body to be there. It's not like every abduction is a physical implant. If they're just doing some sort of analyzing your mind or your soul frequency, or trying to implant subconscious commands and suggestions, they can just take your energy body, your consciousness and your soul, and work on it in another dimension.
Another thing I definitely want to touch on are the constant assaults that we are both, and Dr. Randall too has been coming into this now reality. These attacks, these psychic attacks. Especially to the severity that you and I both experienced. You had one time described it to me that it's like standing on the edge of hell. just about to dump into or just about to fall into the flames. It gets so bad. I can remember one time I was under such attack that the voices were screaming at me I went on a walk, and they were like not incessantly screaming at me to go into the woods and blow my brains out, like just vile, horrible things, and inexplicable, because I left my wife and my daughter at the park, and I started to walk by myself, and it was just suddenly just bombarded by this stuff. And that was when they first started to come in very intense. And then this was before I started seeing the 666s everywhere. I just before then had not been aware of it. And then suddenly that started to pick up, and I started to see 666 everywhere. And then I would suddenly start to feel, different, and feel the mental chaos begin to build. And now I've become so good at it, though, from it happening so much, that I've been able to fight against it. Can you describe some of the psychic attacks that if any of you've been under any, if you have been under any recently, and what those were like in terms of your experience?
Okay, well, I mean, recently it's been better than it used to be, just because the more familiar you become with it, and the stronger you become, the less success they have in doing these things, and therefore the less they even try. They're not going to invest their energy unless they think that there is a chance that they can succeed. Okay. But I remember back in the earlier days, there's a lot of things they can do. They can take the very fast and hard approach, like what you experienced, where all of a sudden, at the snap of a finger, you get bombarded with it's demonic.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only other way I can describe it. It's like demonic stuff where they feel that they have a very brief opportunity to hit you as hard as they can to get you to do something that is irreversible, whether it's suicide or leaving someone, saying something that causes irrevocable damage to a relationship, for example. But they're always like kind of circling around the edge, looking for these little opportunities to screw you up in a really, really bad way. And I'm not saying that all mistakes that humans make are caused by these entities. I'm not excusing that away. But I am saying that when the timing is extremely suspicious and is very sudden and artificial, then you have to question where it's coming from, But they can also take the longer, more subtle approach, where it's more like you wake up one day and all the inspiration and ideas and stuff for projects and things you want to do the night before, it's gone. You don't feel that anymore. It feels like it's been erased from your mind. And maybe your mind feels very blank, like it's been lobotomized. And then over the ensuing couple weeks, you start having more and more depressive thoughts, like you want to give up, like you don't want to do this anymore. You want to take your side down or whatever. And over time, if you don't question these impulses and these thoughts, and if you believe that they are your own, you're going to act on them. And before you know it, you've gone into a downward spiral. You're depressed, alcoholic, drugs, whatever, and eventually possibly suicide. So that's sort of the end game that some of these forces play in trying to take down someone who is spreading light, or someone who's a potential threat. And then they can even target kids who aren't even doing anything yet, because they can read the kid's soul frequency and the probable futures and the destiny, and they can tell that, okay, 10, 20 years from now, they're going to be doing something. So let's try to mess them up in childhood and give them certain traumas and negative subconscious programming that's going to screw them up for life, so that they never achieve what this is. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people out there who unfortunately have been taken out that way. But yeah, I mean, some people ask, well, how can you be out there discussing these truths but not be killed off yet? And they're assuming that some assassin's going to come in and shoot you in the face or something. No, it doesn't work like that. I mean, I can, if you're a big threat to like some sort of government agency, but if you're talking about demonic and alien forces, now they have very subtle, very clever long-term stalking tricks to get you to off yourself.
And I've a lot of times I've analyzed their attack vectors and the ways they come in, and then of course you patch those, and they do look for openings, and like you said, they do sniff for blood, and once they sense it, they go for it. And I've noticed this especially in my own experience. My daughter is she is susceptible sometimes to these attacks, and these attacks during these attacks she gets fixated irrationally on certain things, and it becomes almost like The Exorcist. And I've talked to you about those when they've happened, and those are usually preceded by a series of 666s. On our way to the beach, we saw 8 of them. 2 of them were back to back on 2 cars, always on license plates. Not always, I apologize. For the majority, especially when we're driving. And then that night was like one of those episodes, and it was hard. And I became a victim of it too. For my own, I was drinking a couple beers, trying to just chill out at the beach, and that is normally a recipe for that. You let down your guard a little that way, so they come in. Also with Dr. Randall's experiences, and Dr. Randall, I'm not going to speak for you. I'm going to give this over to you. You on certain instances have had times when you were seemingly downtrodden, and I've noticed that your tone is very reminds me very much of the kind of material, or your tone and the things that you discuss when you've been downtrodden on things, are the kind of things that archons will use when they come into someone's mind, and they start to really they hit you in the spots where it hurts, and they get you all riled up. And in Dr. Randall, you yourself personally, you have come from some very I don't want to say horrible, because let's say life-changing experiences, but and those, I'll go ahead and let you talk for some of these times when you are down on yourself, and let's just lay it bare for our viewers, because, and we have discussed your story before in an episode, but for the purposes of helping others, like Kayla, who we've been recently talking to, the three of us have actually been recently talking to her, and she has described the same kind of phenomenon. So I think the more that we discuss it, the more it lends itself to people being able to recognize it. Once they recognize it, once it enters into their awareness, they will be able to act on it and patch themselves. So Dr. Randall, go ahead.
No. Oh no, I love listening to you guys. No, I've when I think about it, before I met you, Patrick, and you, Tom, I can't imagine all the years I spent in academia, but you've, Tom, given me some insight and advice that I've never ever read anywhere before, and this was when we're talking about spirited, spiritless, and spirit asleep. I've never ever thought of that before, but with all the patients I've had before, and I've owned many clinics and also health clubs and all, and even some friends of the family. There are some folks that when you look at them and you talk to them, there's something missing. There's just something missing in there. And I said, I can't figure it out, because your mind is positive thinking. Look for the bright side. Look for how we can improve and all that. But these folks are intent on doing not good. And then there's a couple of the kids that are associated with my daughters, and especially one in general, that in particular that's like that, where there's that spirit that's missing, where it's just true narcissism, and it's all about me, and life revolves around me, and if all of you die, that's your problem, kind of deal like that. So you've taught me a lot about that, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because I advise people thanks to the internet, in different countries, and some of them, when I listen to them, go, wow, there's something amiss in you. You just don't get it, and then but you taught me a lot there. No, Tom, and you too, Patrick. Now, Tom, when you were a child and you had all these experiences, now, in your study and research, do all children or people experience these things, or maybe brush it off, or why were you and Patrick chosen, to experience all this, especially for you, because it seems like, from what I've listened to, it's happened to you numerous times and often when you were a child. So why you?
Yeah. I've spoken with a lot of people to try to figure out if they have had similar experiences. And even if someone can't remember if they have or not, usually you can tell, okay, so when you have these experiences as a child, it leaves its mark on you. It changes you. Okay. And a lot of times you can tell about a person if they've had extended alien contact through life. It does something to them where, I don't know, maybe it takes being one in order to feel that another one is too, right? But I do know that there are a lot of people who have never had any sort of alien experience in this life. Now, it is possible, and I can't rule this out, that maybe at some point in life, everyone does get taken at least once and maybe chipped or something, or tagged, the same way scientists tag wildlife. I can't prove that, but I'm just saying it's possible. And because it's only a one-time deal, therefore they would not ever really remember it or have too many after effects from it. But you asked why me and why people like Patrick. Well, that's a multidimensional question, because on the one hand, you can say it's almost like they fly over a population and they can scan the consciousness and the soul frequency of babies that are born, or the children that are around, and they can tell who has something valuable, whether it's to be used as a recruitment for their own agenda, or who is a threat to their agenda. And then they can zoom in on them and abduct them and try to shape them in a way that fits their agenda better. So I think that could be part of it. Maybe they could sense why I was born, like why I came here, and maybe they didn't like it, and so therefore they abducted me. Alternatively, some of those groups could have been actually positive, and maybe they're like, oh yeah, there he is. He's in the Matrix now. Let's go take him and give him some programming in a positive way, so that later he can fulfill his purpose better. It could have been, those two things could have been going on. But outside of all that, I do think that there's a metaphysical dimension where, if you believe in reincarnation, then it's not necessary that in this past life you were a peasant farmer, or some person in China or something. You could have very well been an alien in a past life. You could have been an alien that's of the same faction that now is contacting you in this life. Okay, so there might be a metaphysical soul contract going on as well, right, Patrick? Yeah, a metaphysical soul contract where, let's say you're part of an alien group and you see what's going on Earth, and you see that other negative alien groups are coming here trying to take the planet for themselves. And so you decide, okay, well, some of us, we're going to incarnate as humans, and we're going to try to spread from the inside information about the opposing alien faction. The only problem is, once you come here, now you're basically in shark-infested waters. You've jumped into the ocean. And so now these sharks, these other alien groups, they can abduct you too. And they can try to deviate you in a direction that might mean the failure of your mission. So there's all this backstory going on outside this life, before this life, that might explain some of what's going on here. So it's both in terms of your future potential and why you're here, and whether you're a threat or an asset. And it's also about the past, about why you came here originally, like why did you incarnate here? So I think all those factors play in. And I think a lot of people, whether, I don't think they're all spiritless, but I do think that some people are here just for very basic reasons, just raise a family and learn the trials of life and love and betrayal and growing old and, divorce and all that kind of stuff. So, that's fine. If you're here for that, that's cool. But I think other people are here on a more non-human mission, which is actually very human in the sense that it's based on love and altruism for the benefit of the future of humanity. So that's where I'm coming from.
Oh, that's wonderful. No, thanks for that. Oh, I'm going to keep on jumping in. Hey,
no, that's okay.
For you said that, these experiences happen to you, as a young child, and quite often, as far as you remember, yearly. Now, you had mentioned that, you're either a parent or one of your parents might have been around with you, walking in the woods like this. Did they experience the similar thing, and did they recognize what you recognized?
Yeah, so my mom, she was the main one, and even before I was born, she's from Singapore. So even when she lived in Singapore, she would have strange experiences there too. And she was the odd one out in her family. She was the one who had weird experiences. And her mom was actually a Asian shaman, I guess, who had psychic abilities. And she was partially blind in one eye, but she could still see very well, like through psychic vision, and she could see entities and ghosts and everything. So I think there could be something genetic there as well, being passed through the bloodline, and now maybe I have it. But as far as her experiences, during the time, she had many of the classic symptoms of abduction. She had, for example, waking up with huge purple bruises on her thighs with puncture marks in the center of them. Mm. And although at the time, because she didn't know anything about aliens and her memories seemed to have been blocked. See, here's the thing. When you're a kid, your brain operates more in a theta brainwave state, or maybe even like an alpha brainwave state. And in that state, it's more non-local. It's not as sharply focused as it is when you're in your waking state, beta state, which is what most adults, are in. And because of that, it's actually more difficult for aliens to erase your memory and to segment and fracture your personality and compartmentalize your memories when you're a kid. So because I was younger, I was able to remember that stuff. But my mom, being older at the time, she was already in her mid-20s. She didn't remember it. I don't think so. But she did have those puncture marks, which she thought at the time was a ghost of her dead grandma haunting her. And it actually got so bad that she took a plane flight to Singapore to try to get away from it. But it was still happening there. So it was following her around. And so she had that. And later on, she did have her own independent abduction experiences, which I don't remember, but she told me about them, and they're quite vivid as well. So yeah, she's definitely an abductee for sure.
Now, with all your experiences here, your research, there are going to be children who will experience this but won't be believed. Mm-hmm. Could this lead to a lot of emotional, mental distress? That you get into the psychology labeling thing that would lead to things like a schizophrenia or bipolar or avoidant personality kind of deal. Do you, from your experiences, do you see some of the children now that becoming adults, or even when they were kids, that would lead them down that path when they would express what you did, but no one would believe them?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on how it's approached. Is it more like dismissed in a neutral, out of hand fashion, like, oh, you're just imagining it, or you're just dreaming it, or does it lead into a consistent pattern of abuse by the parents?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I'm asking, is that is dismissed, but that you're so frustrated that this has happened to you, mm-hmm. and then nobody believes you.
Oh yeah.
So from your experiences, can this lead to antisocial personality, mm-hmm. Behavior, or some kind of oppositional defiance, things like that, or how these people perceive life? Because one, they're telling the truth, but no one believes them, and with all that, it's actually distress, and not being believed. That plays heavily on the identity that you choose for yourself, or who you think you are. I mean, what is your experience with that, or have you seen anything like that?
Yeah. So funny enough, up until I was about 12, I didn't really think much about my alien experiences as a kid, and it's because the memories were repressed, but they weren't erased. So they're always there under the surface. And one day, all the memories started flooding back, is because that's for the first time in my life since I was a kid that I was thinking back on what happened. All of a sudden, I remember, oh yeah, the Grau dimension and the Stein dimension, the Gray Man and the Stone Man. I remembered all that. And then I even asked my mom and my grandma, like, did I ever talk about these things? And like, oh yeah, you're talking about them all the time as a kid. So I was able to verify it. But so it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 that I really thought about what happened to me. And being in school at the time, being a kid, I was telling other people about it, which did lead to a lot of, no pun intended, but alienation due to people not believing it, or, being called alien boy or whatever, these things that happen in school. So in my case, it was more a sense of alienation and depression, and just a lack of social contact that could have happened otherwise if I had totally blended in, so that was my experience. But if I had been a young kid always talking about it, and my parents didn't believe me, no one believed me, and yet I was being terrified every night. Actually, yeah, when I was a kid in Germany, I was terrified every night. I slept with one eye open. I had the cassette recorder on, playing story tapes over and over and over again, had the lights on, and my back against the wall, because every night was like going through hell for me, just because it was so scary. And I'm sure that did things to my amygdala, so my stress and fear responses now are different than they could have been otherwise. So it changed me, psychologically, biologically there, just through fear from the experiences. But the alienation stuff itself didn't really happen until I was in junior high. And so therefore it didn't imprint on me as much as it would have someone else, where it started as an earlier age. But I think primarily, if someone does get it pretty badly when they're a kid, it's probably going to just lead to, you talked about antisocial personality disorders. And usually that's characterized as either psychopathy or sociopathy. Yeah. But I don't think it would necessarily lead to that unless the alienation were so strong that a person harbored some sort of a hatred against either parents or authority or society and became like those, those loners in school that are always on the edge of shooting the school up, one of those types. So
Yeah.
I think that could happen in extreme cases, but I don't think it's the norm. I think most people who go through these experiences and are not believed, I think they would mainly just develop a very introverted, isolated, unsocialized, not very social type of a personality, just, afraid of people and kind of doubting other people's sincerity because they've been doubted their entire lives.
Well, that would be very sad to me because we only have this limited time on Earth, and if you can't blossom into your true self or the one or who you want to become, then it's you kind of miss out on all that growth. No, yeah, I guess I'll ask this one thing. I'll let you take over here. Is with all that here, and with all these energies and all the labels that you give these entities here, what is your experience or what are your thoughts on are any of them these competing factions? I would say, could there be anything that's pro-social or something that would that they're coming here maybe to benefit you, just to benefit you, to allow you to grow into who you need to become or your true potential so you can share that with others? Is there anything like that where it's just just positive pro-social where that's their intention, to allow you to grow to your best and highest self? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. One is where you have these negative factions who are genuinely trying to take you down and genuinely trying to take over the planet in an overt way. But from a metaphysical perspective, they don't know that they're actually being played by the divine force to serve as a catalyst for your growth through the medium of challenge. Okay. So for example, if you're a kid and you're being abducted, okay, number one, there's all this fear you have to go through when you get abducted on a regular basis and now you're trying to sleep at night. And that fear does have the benefit of making you less fearful of things now. Okay. So like right now, if I were sleeping and I had an alien show up or a demon or a ghost or something like that, I would not really be all that freaked out. I mean, I'd be startled, but I wouldn't be freaked out by it. Whereas someone else who's never had that, they're going to be thinking about it for days. They're not going to let it go. It's going to eat away at them. And in some cases, it could make them become very neurotic and even make them fall apart, given enough time. So in my case, I can deal with a lot of things now that maybe would disturb others too much. Okay, so that's one benefit of it. But also, like on a bigger planetary scale, I think if aliens do show up in a disclosure fashion, and if they end up being deceivers, if they pretend to be saviors, but they're really, acting as Trojan horses to try to shuttle some sort of a control mechanism to kind of enslave us even more. If that were attempted, I'm pretty sure that the spirit within enough people would see through it eventually, that we would rebel and we would actually defeat that agenda. And as a result of that, humanity as a whole would become more discerning, stronger. We'd actually gain a new level of consciousness that would allow us to deal with other alien races in the future without being deceived. Not like naive tribal people who have encountered, let's say Europeans for the first time and don't know that it's actually a corporation looking to take their land. Okay, we're not going to be like that anymore if we survive this disclosure process and make it through and gain the discernment that comes from that. Okay, so that's one aspect of it, that we have these negative aliens that we can learn a lot from and grow from if we respond to them in the correct way. Okay. And the other component, of course, is the idea that there are positive or benevolent aliens. And maybe that's probably what you're asking about. Yeah. And in that sense, I would say yes, for sure. And the reason why I know that is because if they did not exist, we wouldn't be here right now. Our life would not be possible right now because our planet would already be taken over, like way before this. And so there's a lot of information out there, including by contactees and abductees who seem to have had contact with positive alien beings. Okay. And these contactees and abductees, they're out there explaining to people, anyone who will listen, how aliens work, why they're here, and what we ultimately need to know in order to deal with disclosure in a wise and discerning way. There's people out there that are seeing through a lot of the BS that's out there right now being perpetrated by the puppets of the negative alien factions. So, there's people being contacted by aliens who are serving as a force of good and putting actual, like, real useful knowledge out into the population, which indicates, therefore, that whoever is helping them and whoever is influencing them is a positive alien group. So I think both positive and negative exists. And that's why the future isn't set in stone as far as doom and hopelessness and despair, like some people want to say. There is an actual ray of light, and it's because there's people like all of you, everyone watching. There's people and there's other beings that are probably contacting humans that are helping us out. So it's a team effort amongst anyone who is aligned with the light, and that includes both human and alien.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even be here doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the positive alien forces that intervened. But from what I had been explained was that this was a decision I had made before I incarnated. And that's why I was set to go off, as I call it, at the age of 35. My awakening was to trigger then for me to begin my life task. And then, of course, that involved my life flipping upside down. But that's a tale for another time. And all that information is around online. So there's a couple questions, or one more question I want to talk about. And we touched on this when we first started talking. Now, we go back to 5,000 years and go to like ancient Sumeria, and we see like, we know that there was alien intervention. Then they can, back then, the ancients, especially, even predating them, they knew that there were rings on Saturn, and there's no chance they could have known that. Remember I think, isn't it the Sumerian reproduction disc, which was carbon dated to about 5,000 years ago, and it shows in detail cellular details like what a sperm cell looks like, and then the process for fertilization, and it's an absolute detail, and it's carved into a disc. It's Sumeria, right? I believe so. Does anybody know what I'm referring to? Or
yeah.
So, oh, you do? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've seen something like that. I forget.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So they had, and of course they knew these details before there were microscopes. And we know about the flyers. We know about the jinn. We know about everything happening in South America, and then happening on just on every continent basically, and coming down from the skies. A lot of this stuff that's been gone into our myth, and a lot of stuff that's been written, and this is what has evolved myth-wise, or at least biblically, in terms of religion and such, to be known as spiritual warfare, even though it is basically essentially a warfare conducted by the alien factions right now between the negative and the positive. Specifically, you had mentioned, I believe in your writing, that the positive alien faction, it isn't necessarily for they get some benefit in some way or another. There's always, for me, there's kind of a blurry line that maybe you can expand on when it comes to the relationship to let's say the disincarnate, or we're talking disincarnate, and we're talking about like the soul or the spirit level, and then we're talking about how that relates to positive aliens, and we're just looking at things that are more evolved from this in terms of density. So we got like 4D, we got 5D, and then we got 6D, and they're kind of intervening in our reality right now to our benefit, positive factions, and then the negative factions obviously have their own agenda. And would this be what is considered to be the actual devils on the negative side, angels on the positive side, and the spiritual warfare being carried out, and we're just, as humans, we're kind of caught in the middle? Can you expand on that concept where you believe from your own research how that came about, that perception of spiritual warfare versus the alien warfare?
Yeah, well, ultimately, the spirit is what matters. And by spirit, what are we talking about? We're talking about the part of your consciousness that is eternal. It's the individualized God spark within you that makes you you, and that stays intact between incarnations. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And so that's the thing that's not it's not bound in time. It's eternal. So therefore, it's the most valuable thing that we have, because it is what makes us conscious. It's the I within our own consciousness. Okay, so that's what ultimately matters. And even though it's eternal, it does suffer the consequences of making very bad, dark choices. Like if you consistently ignore your conscience, if you consistently choose against your heart, and you choose ego and darkness and betraying others, exploiting them, doing dark things that you know is wrong, it does impact a part of who you are by vibrationally darkening it and kind of walling it off from the divine source that you're plugged into. So that's why some of these aliens that are negative, they are pretty much cut off from a lot of this divine energy source. And that's why they have to resort to harvesting energy from humans, sometimes animals through cattle mutilations and things like that, in order to sustain their abilities and their existence. Okay, it's because they're cut off from the true divine source, which we all have. You have it, I have it, Randall, you have it. So we have this energy source within us, which is divine, and it's what allows us to create and to choose and to be and to influence others in a positive way. So, not everyone, well, not all aliens have that, unfortunately. Yeah, but as far as this battle between darkness and light, you have to view the whole entire alien agenda can be viewed within the context of spiritual warfare. It's because it's kind of like a nested Russian doll, where you have, on a very superficial level, you have political forces fighting against each other, Democrats, Republicans, China, Russia, USA, all that kind of stuff. But that happens within the greater context of an alien agenda, which is to play these powers against each other to create the conditions ripe for an eventual disclosure and new world order scenario, okay? But even that is within the greater context of a spiritual battle between the forces of divinity and spirit and light and truth, and the forces of darkness and deception and manipulation. And so that grand, spiritual battle kind of fractally replicates itself at different lower levels, on the level of politics, even on the level of local politics or schools or families or companies, within which there are the better people and there are the people that are trying to wreck it and make it basically an energy farm for others. So you just got to keep in mind that everything that's happening on the political scene, for the most part, is ultimately part of an alien agenda, or it fits into it.
As above, so below, essentially. Yes. And it's interesting because the two factions that I see squaring off are the, we'll call them like the freedom fighters, and then we'll call it the forces that are trying to enslave us. And that concept of as above, so below, you can see the divide. Really fascinating, at least as what's been rolling out, because I when before all of this COVID stuff and before Bill Gates, it's stuff we all read about the Rothschilds, read about the Rockefellers, read about the Archon agenda, read about the history of aliens, but there was nothing substantial happening to help prove this. So the greatest thing that I've been seeing coming about from everything that's been happening lately with regards to positive forces is everybody has, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have stopped and they've looked up from their life for the first time. Now, you've been going at it a long time. I've been going at it since I became awakened. It was like talking to a wall, but now people are listening to me finally. Which is awesome. So it's interesting that even though they were trying to get us to put on the shackles ourselves, their haste with trying to beat this awakening right now is revealing their true intentions, by and large. And there is an actual race going on, and you could see it between the enslavers and the ones that obviously don't want to be enslaved. Tom, not wanting to keep you here all day, I really do appreciate your time. Dr. Randall, is there anything that you want to add before we let this guy?
I could steal all his time for weeks, but no, I still appreciate your time. No, you've answered so many questions, and you know what's it's interesting because with what I've learned from you already in this brief time, and what I've read about thanks to you, is that you can actually rewrite what we know about psychology or how we teach it, because the psychology was my thing for many years in college and all that, and it just fascinates me what people do and how they think and why they do things. And so what you bring up is something that's never talked about. I would say never. More so, more people might be open to it now, but I think what you bring to the forefront is a change in psychology, a change of how people think, because we don't know what's in that invisible world, because if you go see a counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, of course, psychiatrist, that's a dying field, because people are getting tired of drugs. But is that they're trying to figure out things, just the intention behind behavior. And what you bring is this truth that no one's ever considered before. So anyway, that's my kind of closing comment and all that. What you bring in through your experiences is it updates us all. And I think but we're going to see a lot of changes in our educational curriculum as far as in the field of psychology, or people that become, psychologists or counselors, because it's when we get into the talk therapy, all these things will come up and bubble up that you're either afraid to tell your parents, so no one believes you, but you've got the so-called professional listening to this, and I think now they'll have a bigger and better repertoire, of how to help people, and that's what I get from listening to you, and with all what you've learned and researched, and you growing up as this kid that kind of, I don't know, it makes me kind of scared. You get terrified every night, and I'm glad you had someone to talk to, that can understand you. So anyway, I'm rambling here, but well, Tom, thank you so much for your time and for who you are.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I mean, what we're trying to do here is we're not trying to get rid of science or get rid of psychology. We're adding the missing dimension. It's a two-dimensional thing trying to look at a three-dimensional cube. So we're just adding that extra dimension, which helps untie many of the knots. I mean, whether you're talking about physics or psychology or biology, there's always this missing dimension everywhere you look. And I think it's by design. I think it's to keep us in a box.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right. Yeah.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's why knowledge really is a key, because knowledge leads to disruptive actions, disruptive technologies, disruptive ways of life that threaten to undo the matrix control system. So as long as we can get that out there, and as long as people apply it in their lives, and as long as we can apply it, whether it's technology or whatever field we're in, it's going to take us up to the next level. And that's what matters.
Dr. Randall had made a funny comment one time, and I wrote about this when I was writing an article I wrote as The Social Engineering of the Meaning of Life. And I said, when every truth that you know is built on a foundation of lies, then everything that you know that those lies permeate all of the successive knowledge. And Dr. Randall had said this one time. He's like, when I was in dental school, they taught us fluoride was good. And the people telling us this were, the professionals, the authority figures, the doctors, this and that, the people who had the degrees, the ones teaching the class. So no one had any reason to suspect that it might not be good for you. So it's amazing how it happens. And it's like, with the diagnostic statistics manual in psychology and such, and just, all that stuff is built on, that's all quackery, but they call us the quacks, which, to point out, there's the White Coat Summit that recently went viral, and that Dr. Stella, I don't know if you guys have read anything about her. She was talking about demons. She was talking about reptilians. She was talking about extraterrestrials and such. And of course, the media is saying she's some sort of serious quack doctor, needs to have her practice revoked. We know her as telling the truth, but the established medicine, which is, like Tom said, is there to put us in a box and keep us segmented away from truth. They're trying to destroy her career right now. I don't think it'll be successful, but anyways, thank you so much, Tom. I'd definitely love to do this again sometime with you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and answering our questions. Beautiful answers, perfect recording. I'm looking forward to getting this out, because the discussion of Archon stuff will definitely help people, and for those who are going through that right now. So thanks again so much, and thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.